I want it to be known. If me or you kill somebody, we have to stand the consequence, and we can't vow out on a crime of passion. The man invited her there. She didn't break and enter. She didn't just come unannounced. I can't see how she would take an innocent child's life instead of allowing her to leave her home. Because at that point, the man brought her there.
I can still hear her voice like it was yesterday. Shaky, quiet. It was almost like she was holding her breath. Tyra called her mother in the middle of a panic, whispering from behind a locked bathroom door inside a stranger's house. Except it wasn't a stranger's house. She thought she was visiting someone she liked, someone she trusted, the kind of man who made her laugh, who called her beautiful, who said all the right things to make her believe he was single. But Tyra never made it out of that house alive. The call ended with a single sound, a gunshot. And then, silence. By the time police arrived, it was already too late. Now here's where the story should have ended. A woman was shot and killed. The shooter confessed. There was a 911 call, physical evidence, and a motive. It was supposed to be a clear-cut case. Open and shut. Justice served. Right? Except that's not what happened. The woman who pulled the trigger, Stephanie Alexander, was arrested, yes. But she was allowed to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She wasn't charged with murder. She didn't face trial. And in the end, she was sentenced to just 5 years in prison. 5 years. For taking someone's life. A daughter. A friend. A 25-year-old woman who had dreams, plans, and people who loved her. But here's the twist most people don't know. Tyra didn't break into that house. She didn't stumble in by mistake. She was invited there. By Stephanie's husband. The same man who stood by as she was gunned down. And the justice system? It let him walk away untouched. Not one charge. Not one consequence. Not even a question asked. Now tell me, how does a man lure a woman into his home, stand by while his wife kills her, and face absolutely nothing? Was it truly just a jealous rage? Or was it something deeper? Something darker? Because when I look at this case, I don't just see a love triangle gone wrong. I see a carefully built trap. One that Tyra never saw coming. And the more I dig into it, the more I realize. Stephanie may have pulled the trigger, but someone else set her up to do it. I need you to follow me closely as we uncover every detail of this case in loving memory of Tyra. I didn't know Tyra personally, but the more I learned about her, the harder it became to say her name without feeling like I lost someone too. She was only 25. Young, yes, but grounded. Intentional. While most people her age were still figuring life out, Tyra already had a vision. She wasn't just dreaming about a career, she was building it, piece by piece, with her own 2 hands. She designed clothes. Beautiful, bold, creative pieces. And she was good at it. You could see her passion in every stitch. It wasn't just a hobby, it was her future. She wanted to create something lasting. A brand. A legacy. And she wasn't waiting around for permission. Her mother, Tanya, once said that Tyra didn't just want to live life. She wanted to make her mark. And from everything I've seen, she was doing just that. She was focused, kind, loyal, a little sassy when she needed to be, but never reckless, not careless, never the kind of person who would knowingly walk into danger. So how does a young woman like that end up dead inside someone else's home? It started with a man, doesn't it always? Tyra had recently started seeing someone. Not officially, just texting, talking, hanging out when they could. He was older, smooth, charming, the kind of man who knew how to say the right things at the right time. Tyra liked him. You could hear it in her messages to friends. She felt like he saw her, like he respected her hustle. Finally, a man who wasn't intimidated by her ambition. He wasn't flashy. He didn't do too much. But he had this calm, laid-back energy that made Tyra feel safe and comfortable. But here's the thing about comfort. It can make you stop asking questions. She didn't know much about him. Not really. Not where he worked. Not who he lived with. Not who else he might have been texting. But he was consistent. Always quick to reply. Always keeping her attention. And sometimes, that's all it takes. They spent time together. Quietly. Discreetly. No red flags. At first. He never mentioned having a wife. Never hinted at being in a relationship. In fact, he made himself sound available. But behind that charm, behind every conversation, every little joke, every casual invitation, there was something else. A secret. Because this man, he wasn't single. And the house he invited Tyra to wasn't his alone. It belonged to both of them, him and his wife. And on the morning of August 1st, 2023, that wife came home. Now, here's where most stories would pause and say, it was a case of jealousy, that it was a heat-of-the-moment thing, that emotions ran too high, that someone just snapped. But if you believe that, you're only hearing half the story. Because what happened next wasn't an accident. It wasn't just rage. It was a decision. And Tyra? She never saw it coming. She thought she was walking into a private moment with a man who cared about her. Instead, she walked straight into a setup.
Hey, listen, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years, rocking my peers and putting suckers in fears, making the tears rain down like a mop. Soon, listen to the bass go boom.
Let's go back a bit to when Tyra arrived at that house. I imagine Tyra stood outside the door for a second, maybe checking her reflection in her phone. She probably thought nothing of the silence. No barking dogs. No kids yelling. No loud TV in the background. Just quiet. She walked into the house. At first, it seemed normal. She may have even smiled when she stepped inside. That smile she always wore when she was trying to be polite but curious, maybe slightly nervous. She probably called out his name. No answer. She looked around. The house was clean, quiet. But then, on the couch, she saw something. A woman's jacket. A purse. Maybe a pair of shoes near the door. Something was off. Tyra had been there before. But this time, the energy felt different. Somewhere in that moment, her instincts kicked in. She moved toward the back of the house, toward the bathroom. Maybe she wanted to freshen up. Maybe she just needed to think. Or maybe she already felt it, that this wasn't going to end well. She stepped into the bathroom and locked the door behind her. Meanwhile, Stephanie Alexander had just pulled up outside. She opened the door to her own home and was met with something she never expected to see. Another woman's belongings spread out in her living room. No voices, no warning, just a silent confirmation of every suspicion she had. Her husband? He was in the bedroom. He didn't come out. He didn't explain. He didn't stop her. Stephanie didn't call out. Didn't argue. Didn't ask, who is she? She turned around, walked to the dresser, and took out a gun. She knew exactly where it was. No hesitation. No fumbling. Her hands knew the weight of that weapon. That was muscle memory. And with that, she started walking. Down the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. One step at a time. Tyra must have heard her footsteps. Must have known something was happening. But she didn't run. She didn't scream. She couldn't. She was trapped in that bathroom. No window. No back exit. Just a locked door and a voicemail. And then, Tyra made the most heartbreaking decision of her life. She called her mother. It went to voicemail. But she didn't hang up. She whispered. You can barely hear her. She's breathing heavily. She says, "Mama, I'm scared. I'm locked in a bathroom. I don't know what to do." Her voice is shaking. And then you hear it. Footsteps. Getting closer. A woman's voice, sharp. Angry. Asking questions. Demanding answers. And then you hear the door handle rattle. Then banging. Louder. Tyra is crying now. She's begging. Pleading through the door. She doesn't want to fight. She's saying she didn't know. She didn't know he was married. She didn't mean to disrespect anyone. That she'll leave. That she's sorry. But Stephanie doesn't stop. Then a silence. 1 second. Maybe 2. A breath. And then a gunshot. Just one. Tyra's voice disappears. All you can hear next is the sound of someone breathing heavily. And then the line goes dead. Tyra collapsed inside that bathroom. Alone. Afraid. Her last words spoken into a phone that was never answered. She never got the chance to explain. Never got the chance to defend herself. But here's where the story twists again. Stephanie didn't run. She didn't try to hide. She called 911. Calm. Collected. And when they picked up, she told them something shocking. She said Tyra broke into her home. That she was defending herself. That she feared for her life. That it was self-defense. And that one phone call changed everything. I've listened to the 911 call more times than I care to admit. And no matter how many times I hear it, it never feels real. Not because of what happened, but because of how calm she was. Stephanie Alexander doesn't sound frantic. She doesn't sound panicked or broken or scared. Her voice is level, measured, controlled. I shot someone, she says. She was in my house. That's it. No mention of a fight. No trembling in her voice. No breathless sobbing like you'd expect after taking someone's life. Just 5 words. Like she'd knocked over a glass of water. Police were dispatched immediately. They arrived to find Tyra's lifeless body still inside the bathroom. Blood on the floor. Her phone near her body. The door had been broken in. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere else in the house. No broken window. No picked lock. No signs of a break-in. And yet, Stephanie stuck to her story. She said Tyra had no right to be there. That she feared for her life. That Tyra had tried to confront her. That it all happened so fast. But remember, Tyra had been invited. There was a trail of messages. Receipts. Location sharing. Texts to friends. And most importantly, that voicemail. Tyra's voice had been recorded in real time. Her fear. Her pleas. The sound of her begging to be let go. To be spared. And even with all of that, they didn't charge Stephanie with murder. They charged her with voluntary manslaughter. Not because the evidence wasn't strong enough, but because she said the magic words, "I was afraid." In North Carolina, if you say you feared for your life and claim self-defense inside your own home, the law can sometimes bend in your favor. Even if you were the one holding the gun. Even if the other person didn't have a weapon. Even if they never laid a finger on you. So instead of calling it what it was, a cold-blooded shooting, authorities labeled it a domestic dispute. The media ran with it. News headlines described it as a tragic incident between 2 women. They didn't use Tyra's name in the headlines at first. They didn't call it what it really was, a setup, a killing, a betrayal. They used words like altercation, quarrel, and confrontation. But there was no confrontation. Tyra didn't raise her voice. Tyra didn't touch anyone. Tyra was hiding, whispering, crying. And for that, she got a bullet to the chest. Tyra's mother, Tanya, was in disbelief. It didn't make sense. Her daughter had done everything right. She told someone where she was going. She recorded the moment. She didn't fight back. She tried to leave. And now, the system was telling her, quietly, to move on. To let her daughter be written off as just another headline. But Tanya? She wasn't built for silence. She wasn't about to let her daughter be buried quietly. Not this time. Tanya began speaking out. She contacted local reporters. She posted on social media. She sat down for interviews, sharing Tyra's voice, her voicemail, and her story. She refused to let the world forget that her daughter was more than just a body on a bathroom floor. She was an entrepreneur, a creative, a daughter, a friend, and she deserved justice. Community members started asking questions. Why was the charge only voluntary manslaughter? Why wasn't the husband charged? Why was there no public outrage? Tanya demanded to see everything. Every piece of evidence, every text, every recording. She pushed for the voicemail to be heard. She wanted people to know what Stephanie did, what Tyra suffered, and how quickly the law had looked the other way. The voicemail became a key piece. It proved that Tyra didn't break in, that she didn't threaten anyone, that she was cornered, trapped, and pleading. But even with all of that, Stephanie remained free on bond. She went home, while Tyra's family was left to plan a funeral. A funeral for a woman who should still be here. I still remember the way Tanya Hoskins looked in that first news interview. She sat in front of the camera holding a photograph of Tyra, fingers trembling, but her voice? Steady, unshaken. "This is my daughter," she said. She was 25. She had dreams. She had a future. And she did not deserve to die in someone's bathroom. It didn't matter how many times she had to say it. She kept showing up, channel after channel, interview after interview, holding Tyra's picture, repeating her name, refusing to let people forget that this wasn't some faceless headline or neighborhood scandal. This was murder. And then she said something that changed everything. "She left me a voicemail," Tanya told the reporter, while she was dying. That moment sent shockwaves through the room. The reporter leaned in. The crew paused, and Tanya reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. On it was the final piece of evidence the world needed to hear. Not a theory, not a rumor. Tyra's voice, the fear in it, the sound of her whispering through tears. "Mama, I'm scared. I'm locked in a bathroom. I think she has a gun." Tanya handed the audio to the police. She sat down with detectives and played the whole thing. The footsteps, the banging, the way Tyra begged to be let go, the way she promised she didn't know, how she swore she would leave. And then, that silence, that gunshot. You could see the officers' faces shift. Because everything Stephanie had told them, the story about a break-in, about feeling threatened, it all started to crumble. The voicemail made it clear. Tyra had been lured there. She didn't force her way in. She was invited. Welcomed. Text messages proved it. Call logs showed it. Tyra had trusted someone who pretended to care about her. And now she was gone. When Tanya asked the detectives what would happen next, they looked her in the eye and told her, "We're reopening the case." Just like that, everything changed. Stephanie was arrested again. This time, not for voluntary manslaughter. This time, it was second-degree murder. The charge was stronger. The evidence is undeniable. The pressure from the public, mounting. But as much as Tanya felt relief, there was something else she wasn't prepared for. The silence. From Stephanie's husband, the man who invited Tyra there. The man who stood in the bedroom while she was shot. Who never called 911. Who never tried to stop it. Who never came forward with the truth. He walked free. Not questioned publicly. Not held accountable. Not charged. And the legal system didn't force him to. Because justice is a game with rules. And sometimes, it protects the wrong people. We waited for a trial. For justice. For some moment in court where the truth would be laid bare, and someone, anyone, would say, Tyra Crosby deserved better than this. But it never came. Despite the evidence, despite the voicemail, despite the countless interviews, the outcry, the pressure from the community, Stephanie Alexander took a deal. She pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. Not second-degree murder. Not even aggravated assault. Just manslaughter. And with that plea, there would be no trial. No witnesses called. No cross-examination. No forensic experts. No jury. Just a quiet deal made behind closed doors. And when she stood in that courtroom, she didn't look like the woman Tyra had feared in her final moments. She wore a plain jumpsuit. Her hands were cuffed. Her face blank. She turned toward the judge and said the words, "I'm sorry for what happened. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." That was it. She didn't say Tyra's name. She didn't take full responsibility. She just apologized for what happened, like it was an accident. Like the gun had gone off on its own. And the court accepted that apology. Stephanie Alexander was sentenced to just 5 to 7 years in prison. 5 years. For taking a young woman's life. For setting a trap. For pulling the trigger. For walking away while she bled out on a bathroom floor. When the sentence was read aloud, there was a silence in the room so sharp it could cut through steel. Tyra's mother, Tanya, gasped. Her siblings wept. Someone in the back started screaming. And then, everything exploded. Stephanie's husband, the same man who lured Tyra to the house, the one who stood silently as she died, had the audacity to show up in court that day. He sat quietly during the hearing, head down, avoiding everyone's eyes. But when the sentence was read, and it became clear that he'd walk out untouched, that he wouldn't spend a single night behind bars, Tyra's cousin stood up. "Say her name," she shouted. "Say Tyra's name." The courtroom officers tried to intervene, but by then it was too late. Tyra's family surged forward. There were shouts, tears, pushing, and screaming. A full-blown courtroom brawl broke out. Security rushed in. People were escorted out in handcuffs. Emotions boiled over, and no one could blame them. Because what do you do when justice slaps you in the face? When the person who pulled the trigger gets less time than a drug charge? When the man who lured her there never faced a single charge? He was never arrested, never questioned publicly, never held accountable for his part in the setup. He walked away free, just like that. And for Tyra's family, that's when it became clear. This wasn't just a legal failure. It was a moral one. After the sentencing, Tanya Hoskins did what no mother should ever have to do. She went home without her daughter. She returned to Tyra's bedroom, still filled with her scent, her sketches, her half-finished designs, and the quiet hum of dreams that would never come to life. But Tanya didn't retreat into silence. She couldn't, because the world had moved on, and her daughter's name was already fading from the headlines. So she lit a candle, and then she lit another. She held a vigil in Charlotte, a city that had watched the story unfold but never truly understood the cost. Dozens of people showed up. Friends, neighbors, strangers who had followed the case online. They held candles, wore t-shirts with Tyra's face, and stood in silence to honor a life that should never have been taken. Some came to mourn. Others came to ask questions. Loud ones. How can someone shoot a guest in their home and walk away with 5 years? Why wasn't there a trial? Why wasn't the man charged? No one had answers. And that was the problem. Tyra's case cracked something wide open. Because it wasn't just about one woman and one bullet. It was about what her death revealed. about who gets protected in this country and who doesn't. The justice system had failed Tyra at every step. She wasn't armed. She wasn't a threat. She had a voicemail that captured her fear in real time. But none of that was enough to bring her full justice. There was no protection for her, even in death. No real accountability for the people who manipulated her. No serious charges for the man who lured her to the house. No effort to dig deeper, to ask why Stephanie pulled that trigger so easily, or whether she had planned to do so all along. And because there was no trial, there were no answers. No cross-examination. No expert witnesses. No public reckoning. Just a deal. A sentence. And silence. People in Charlotte, and far beyond, began to speak up. Black mothers. Activists. Advocates for women's rights. They held signs that read, "Justice for Tyra, say her name," and 5 years is not enough. Because it wasn't. 5 years was an insult. A quiet, bureaucratic way of saying, her life didn't matter as much. And Tanya knew it. She stood in front of that crowd, voice cracking, but still strong. "My daughter's name is Tyra Chanel Crosby," she said. "And I won't let you forget her." The cameras rolled. The candles burned. But justice? Still out of reach. Tyra's story isn't just about what happened in that house. It's about what didn't happen in court, and the silence that followed. I keep going back to that voicemail. The fear in Tyra's voice. The way she whispered through the door. The silence after the shot. Tyra Chanel Crosby didn't break into anyone's home. She didn't threaten anyone. She didn't fight. She trusted the wrong person. And the price was her life. She thought she was visiting someone she liked. Instead, she walked into a setup. And now, her voice, her final, shaking words, are all we have left. Stephanie Alexander took her life and walked away with 5 years. But the man who lured Tyra there, who stood by and let it happen, he never faced a single charge. So I'll ask you, should Stephanie have served more time? Should her husband be held accountable? What would justice even look like now? Let's talk about it. Because staying silent? That's how these stories disappear. If this story shook you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the system isn't always fair. But stories like this need to be told. Tyra's life mattered. And we won't forget her name. Tyra Chanel Crosby.